Hi there and welcome to Bike File with me, Wazza, the show that tells you all about the best bikes on the market. And this week we're going to be bringing you an episode with a difference because Rod, Louise and myself have all taken a trip down memory lane to pull out what we reckon are our highlights of this current series. There's been bickering, fighting, tantrums, tears, the lot. But we reckon we've finally pulled together the best highlights for you. So without further ado, here they are. Louise will be harking back to her happy days on Harley's 883 Sportster, while my favourites are going to include, amongst others, Kawasaki Z1000 and their ZX6R, while Rod will be going back to his fine times on Harley's Electroglide Anniversary Edition. And to kick proceedings off, I'd love to go back to a motorcycle that has to have been one of the finest riding experiences I've had the pleasure of savouring in the last 12 months. This is a motorcycle that courted controversy with its looks when it came out, and we filmed it on a freezing cold day. But even so, the riding that was done was magical. So without further ado, let's take it away with Ducati's 999.
Let's get the formalities out of the way first. This bike ain't anywhere near as purdy as the 916, 996, 998 family, and nor is it likely to achieve their timeless majesty either. But who cares? We could argue semantics on styling all day long, but personally, I'd rather get on with riding the bikes rather than jawing about them.
Climb aboard the 999 and you know straight away that this is a completely different animal to its predecessor. It is longer, it is slightly lower, and it is altogether a damn sight more comfortable. Yes, the 998's famous torture rack riding position that both Ducati and osteopaths around the world have been making fortunes out of for years now is at last gone. This definitely is a Ducati you can actually spend time on away from the racetrack without needing a hot bath and a brace of masseurs to look after you upon your return.
But up the ante and you'll still find that despite the new and improved bonus comfort, you're still in just the right position on board for banzai track attack when necessary. The 999 retains the mind-bending mid-corner poise of its predecessors. No other production sports bike feels as safe at silly lean angles as one of these. Best thing about the 999's handling though is although the mid-corner abilities are still impeccable, where every incarnation of the predecessor from the 916 onwards needed a serious amount of body weight to actually get it turned in the first place, the 999 now flicks in with the lightest of nudges on the inside bar and then proceeds to happily hug the curb all the way to the spot-on apex of your choice. Precision and sweet steering. Whatever next. The gearbox is prone to the odd false neutral here and there when you're tramping on at the track. On the road it's not so much of a problem, but if you are on to thrashing your mates on a track day, make sure you use a firm left boot to avoid any embarrassing misgears. If we were poking around for another downside to this bike, it would be the question of noise. Or rather the lack of it. This bike is quite simply far too quiet for a great big red V-twin. To be honest, the sound is more of an apology than a boom that comes out of that exhaust.
Otherwise, the 999 is absolutely bang on. And as for the looks, get over it, will ya? This bike outrides the one it replaces and it ain't going away, so get used to it. Now let's see how it stacks up overall.
Performance, 10 out of 10. Quite simply, this bike is a stunning package of handling and power and braking. Styling, 7 out of 10. I like this bike more and more every time I see it. But that said, it's not going to be any great beauty like its predecessor. Comfort, 7 out of 10. Quite amazingly, the most comfortable Supersports Ducati ever. Not the torture rack that the old models were, very well improved. Reliability. We're going to sit on the fence here and go with a 5 out of 10 because the bike simply hasn't been out long enough to be proven yet. But the old models were getting better and better. If you do want one of these though, make sure you do spend money on proper servicing. Value for money, 7 out of 10, but only if you're loaded. 11.5 grand is a lot of money for a motorcycle. That said, if you can afford it, you get an awesome package.
And now we go from one thoroughbred V-twin to another, albeit of a very different nature, because when all was said and done at the end of the series, Louise's favourite bike was Harley's 883 Sportster. So take it away, Louise.
Thanks, Wazza. And now for a Harley. You know, it's difficult to understand looking at this Sportster to imagine that this bike began its starting life from the Harley-Davidson race programme. You see, it all happened in the engineering department of that factory in Milwaukee when the engineers decided to experiment with an overhead valve version of the famous K-Racer. Then, in 1957, after a bit of trial and error, it all came together and this bike was unveiled, the famous Sportster. All these years later, the Sportster in many ways remained unchanged, only it's as far away from a race bike as any two-wheeler could be. But whilst the R1 riding cynics out there will probably curse their way through the duration of this test, I have to admit this Harley ain't half bad. Powered by Harley's smallest motor, the 883 Evo, this bike may weigh well in at a rather unsportster-like 240 kilos and produce less horsepower than the manufacturers would care to mention, but it's quite good fun and effortless to ride. All the twins' power can be found low down in the rev range, and once up and over 5,000 revs there's very little going on. Now before all that power is transferred to the road, it goes via the standard issue 5-speed box, and although it only requires quite a positive shove, you just can't escape the whole clunkiness of the whole thing. And you know what, I would have thought by now Harley Davidson would have dialed that out, but I guess it's just part of the whole Harley D thing. The wooden brakes are wholeheartedly unexciting. There's practically no feel to speak of, and even with a fistful of lever, you still can't stop the thing in a hurry. What's interesting though is the way a Sportster can be hustled through corners faster than you might think. The suspension may look rather primitive, but it does work. In fact, a well-ridden Sportster can prove quite a tool on a tight, twisty road, thanks to its half-decent geometry and low centre of gravity. But most will want a Sportster because it's a Harley Davidson, and not an expensive one at that, at £5,900. It's the baby of the range. The Sportster is the entry-level model. But don't forget, this is a special one. It's the R version and has a host of extras, including this rather retro-looking paint job. So let's see how our Sportster measures up with our scores on the doors. The performance rates 7 out of 10. That torquey motor will push you forwards at a reasonable rate so long as you access the low down power. Comfort, well, it's a bit of a stretch to those dirt bike style bars, but the riding position is overall pretty good and feels most relaxed. The suspension is also fairly supple. Build quality, our Sportster scores a 9. You see, these bikes are built to last. Every component is solid, and providing you look after the chrome properly, it will happily see you through many years of ownership. Value for money, well, around $5,999, but almost £1,000 more than the standard 883. The Sportster is well priced, and a fairly good bet for the first time buyer of a custom style machine. 8 out of 10. Street cred, 7 out of 10, because non-bikers think the Sportster is a fairly serious machine, lending a combination of presence, decoration and noise.
Well, that's your lot for part 1, but do join us again in part 2 when we'll be back with a load more of our favourites from this last series. Now, this is a bike that takes me back. The Z1000 launch was a pearler. We were on the Amalfi Coast. You could look out of the beautiful hotel window across to Mount Vesuvius. The food was excellent, the roads were great, the company was good, Italian women everywhere. Oh, sorry. Welcome back to part 2 of Bike File, where, as you may have guessed from my inane ramblings, we are now dealing with the Kawasaki Z1000. A machine that has to be one of my favourites of the series simply because the launch was so good, especially coming as it did at a really dank and dismal time of the year. Now, it was a pleasant surprise as well to find out that the bike was pretty decent. So here's what we made of it at the time. One Z1000 coming at you. The lovely new Kawasaki Z1000. Climb aboard the big Z1000 and the first thing you're going to notice is how it miraculously shrinks between your legs. Not a nice feeling for most of us blokes, I know, but in the case of this bike, it actually works very well. The thing is, despite it weighing 198 kilos, once you get on, due to the low seat height, those big wide bars, it all becomes very manageable indeed. And also, the way that bikini fairing and headlight cowl is also small in front of you, it makes the bike appear smaller than it is. So, muscling it about need not be the hard work you think it could be from the start. It's really a pretty comfortable motorcycle. The way the bars, the pegs and the seat are all set up hold you very nicely without stressing you across your shoulders or on your wrists or anything like that you might find on a sports bike. But with a few miles under your belt, what you're going to really want to start doing is getting silly with the throttle. Now, if that motor sounds familiar, that's because this is the old ZX9 motor. But it has been changed a bit for the Z1000. Kawasaki brought it out to 953 cc's and stuck on fuel injection. Benefits of this are you've got a bit more mid-range and bottom end to the motor, but you don't have quite the same top end. Then again, who's going to want to do 160 mile an hour with no mega fairing? Now, if I was to criticise the motor at all, I would say there's not quite the instant bottom end hit that I was expecting to find. But once you get above 4,000, things really do get motoring, and there's stacks of mid-range for easy, fast progress or stupid stunting, depending on how you're feeling. A little sniff of the clutch and you're going to happily see the front wheel popping up into the air. It's not the easiest bike to balance on the back wheel once you're there, but then half the fun's practicing. Looking across the spec sheet, you'll find the Z1000 is pretty well equipped when it comes to the handling department. It's a fully adjustable monoshock at the back, and those big chunky 41mm upside down forks at the front are also adjustable for preload and rebound. It's not top sport spec kit, but it is very good, and especially on a basic bike like this, helps keep the whole plot together nicely. Now will customarily be time for us to head over to the scoreboards and see just exactly how the Z1000 rates. But before we do that, while we're still on this launch, we're going to pop over and have a word with the men at Kawasaki to see what they've got to say about their new baby, and also canvass some opinions from some of the other reprobate UK journalists who seem to be lurking around the bar.
Z1000 is a very important bike to Kawasaki. I mean, we're excited about it, but then again, we made it. The bike is a statement standing still, and it makes a tremendous impression on people.
You know, front three quarters, from the outside there's that big engine, it's right in your face. The headlight arrangement, a little kind of bikini screen, is, I mean, it's reminiscent of things that have gone before, but it's got a real nice modern twist to it.
A lot of attitude coming from this bike, so you don't have to chop down your blade or R1 anymore. You can buy this one right out of the block and be ready to go.
It seemed to have plenty of grunt about it, and it lifted all right, came up pretty good.
Right, but enough of what they thought, because it's time for the bike file ratings. Performance, 7 out of 10, which means you can happily throw this bike around to the edge of the tyres and the limits of its ground clearance, and also get from A to B. Comfort, that's another 8 out of 10. Very good indeed. Nice plush seat, plenty of room to move about, good stretch to the bars, fits very nicely. Pillion accommodation is bearable, but not brilliant. Reliability, we're going to give it an 8 out of 10. I can't see anything major going wrong with this bike. All the technology is tried and tested and well put together. Value for money, 7 out of 10. It's up at the top end of the scale for these bikes, coming in at just over 7 grand once you've added the on the road charges in. But it is also a new model, so Kawasaki have had to do a lot of tooling up to get ready to make it, which is probably why the cost is up a bit. And now it's time for something much more laid back and relaxed, much like this here Kawasaki Mean Streak, which, as you can probably see by now, I'm not actually sitting on. It was, in fact, a clever piece of camera trickery. I am in this very comfortable armchair, but this does take us rather nicely to our next bike, because Rod, being the traditionalist and the purist that he is, has picked out his favourite motorcycle of the series as Harley Davidson's Electroglide Classic, the Centenary Limited Edition, which is about as comfortable as this armchair, but a lot more fun to ride. Still, I'm not going to waffle on about it. I'm going to let Rod do that, and here he is.
Harley Davidson has always been the bike of choice among the rich and famous. Apart from the obvious Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper connection, famous names like Steve McQueen, Mickey Rourke and Elvis Presley have all owned and ridden Harley Davidson motorcycles. In fact, it's rumoured in certain circles that God himself rides a Harley. Well, if the Almighty was to choose a bike from Harley's current catalogue, you can bet your immortal soul that the Harley Davidson Electroglide will be at the very top of his shortlist. The Electroglide Ultra Classic continues a long line of Milwaukee big cruisers that include the Hydroglide and Duoglide, and looks like it might have just been spirited here from 1958. Big fat wheels, huge mudguards, that's fenders, fat bob tanks, pullback bars, footboards and built-in hard luggage give the Harley an instantly recognisable profile, which has become a motorcycling icon. This pushrod 45-degree V-twin displaces a full 1450cc, and now comes with the option of fuel injection. Rather coyly, Harley don't quote a power output for this engine, but do claim a massive 78 foot-pounds of torque. Riding the big glide is a revelation. What looks like a huge and bulky bike on the stand is surprisingly light and easy to manage on the move, and this riding position has to be the most comfortable on the planet. This really does feel like a kind of bike you could cross continents on. While the performance is more impressive than you might expect, the current crop of Harleys do sound a little muted. That distinctive rumbling exhaust note has been suppressed in the interests of emissions regulations and noise laws. That 50s style fairing conceals utterly modern Showa forks. Brakes front and rear are now 4-pot units on floating discs and are much improved over previous designs, well capable of holding down the bike's 345 kilograms weight from speed. Though some bikers still regard these bikes as slow and agricultural, Harley's latest models have the quality and performance to prove otherwise. And wherever you go, to any corner of the globe, people will always recognise a Harley Davidson. I can't speak for the Almighty, but the Electroglide has certainly made it onto the very top of my shortlist of very desirable motorcycles. So let's put some scores on the doors. The Harley is no Fireblade, nor does it claim to be. What it does do is deliver lots of usable power in a style perfectly matched to the laid-back cruiser feel. It's stable and solid, and the latest brakes and suspension are well up to the job. 8 out of 10 for performance. While the riding position is superb, I did find the screen just a little too low for my 6'4" frame. At speed, the buffeting left my head bobbing in a pocket of turbulence like an unclaimed lottery ball. In stock trim, I'm going to give it 9 out of 10 for comfort. While the overall finish is very good, I have to say I do have reservations about the wisdom of chroming aluminium engine casings. Subject this bike to the worst rigours of a British winter and it could begin to look shabby quite quickly. Harley's latest engine and transmission design is solid and well made, and with proper maintenance should outlast much of the opposition. Overall quality? 7 out of 10. Though it's not cheap at £15,495, I have to give this bike 8 out of 10 for value. Ah, lovely scenery, lovely bike. What more could you possibly want?
And so we come to our last bike of the show, which could not be more different than that enormous Electroglide that Rod's just been on, because we're now moving from rolling gym palace to pared down racer with this, the Kawasaki ZX6, a personal favourite of mine. Now, I know that the CBR 600 is the fractionally better bike when it comes down to it at the track, but to ride, this is more involving and more intoxicating. It's that motor, it's just got a little more mid-range, a little more rasp. I love the brakes, I love the handling. It rocked my world at the launch, and it did it again when we tested it not so long ago. So let's go back to those happy days with the ZX6 at Donington Park.
For a while now, Kawasaki ZX6 had languished in the doldrums somewhat in the ultra-competitive Sport 600 class. It was always fast, it was always a handler. Trouble was, the competition, as they got hotter and hotter, were just a little bit faster, a little bit sharper, and most importantly, better looking.
Even a capacity increase last year where the bike leapt to 636 cc's from its original 599 wasn't enough to send it to the head of the pack. Put simply, the ZX6 was starting to show its age. But it seemed the men at Kawasaki knew this, because at the end of last year, this here all-new ZX6 broke cover, and just one glance is enough to tell you this bike means business.
For starters, it is tiny. This is a motorcycle that has not only spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel, but it's also been down the gym on a very strict regime with a personal trainer. However, you won't need to do any of these things to get on one, because despite its microscopic dimensions, the ZX6 is actually surprisingly comfortable, so you can still hack a little bit of fast touring or commuting outside of your regular flat-out tomfoolery. However, potentially practical or not, if you buy one of these and don't take it on a track day, then I would suggest you be dragged outside, whipped, and then publicly hung from the nearest lamppost in your leathers as an example to others of what not to do. What I'm getting at is this bike is a stunning track performer, and to not take it there if you owned one would be an absolute travesty.
This bike turns into corners with devastating haste and unerring accuracy. Hugs any line you care to go for, tighter than a child hugs its mother on its first day at school, and it will lean, lean and lean some more until you feel the mirrors will surely touch down. And on top of this razor accuracy, you'll find stunningly high quality standard suspension units front and rear that give so much feedback you're never in any doubt as to what the tyres are doing. Then there are the brakes. Oh yes, they are good. You'll find blade levels of bite here, but backed up with even more feel and even more control.
As if the rest of the bike weren't good enough already, you'll be over the moon to discover that the motor's a belter too. Now, it could be argued that Kawasaki are packing an unfair advantage with their 636cc's in here over the rest of the class's 599. But then, this isn't a race class, no rules and regs apply, so Kawasaki can actually do what they like. What you get is a motor with plenty of poke and the strongest mid-range yet found on any 600 bike.
The delivery is super clean, the howl from the end can is sex on a stick, and this is a deliciously flexible motor to get your teeth into. Oh, and should you fancy wheelies, then this is the 600 for you, because that extra mid-range makes keeping it up easier than ever.
So there you have it, the ZX6R is a blinding motorcycle, and that's my final word on the subject. Well, apart from these actually, because here come the scores.
Performance, 9 out of 10. Absolutely stacks of it. Styling, 9 out of 10. Best looking 600 for my money. Street cred, 8 out of 10. It's new, it's cool, and it looks good. Ooh, sounds nice too. Reliability, 7 out of 10. So far they've not been around long enough for us to know of any major problems with them, but then again I can't foresee any because Kawasaki's track record in this field has been very good to date. Value for money, 7 out of 10. You've got to pay to have the latest, but this bike will reward you.
Well, I'm afraid that brings us to the end of this show and also the end of this series of Bike File. And I have to say, we have had a right giggle over the last few months messing around with the bikes that we've had, even though there have been a couple of turkeys that have popped up. But that's it, and it's all over for now. Fortunately, both us and yourselves are saved because the march of technology is relentless, and that means that fine motorcycles like this here R1, currently right on the cutting edge, are bound to be replaced soon by faster, lighter, sharper models, and when they are, we're going to be there to ride them and bring them to you. So please do join us again for Series 3 when we're back later in the year. See you then.